Very nice. Et les snorkers sont arrivés.
Oh, excellent.
Well, yes, they're going to go cold, though, because we have here a little tale. John plays the church organ. This evening, John is going to play the church organ. It's quite cold outside, says Janet. Make sure you wrap up. So John puts on his knee-length pink leather boots, a gold lame balaclava, and best purple fur coat. Mrs. Casey is already at the church, arranging the flowers for the services the next day. "Hello, Mrs. Casey," says John. "Hello, John," says Mrs. Casey. "What fun." John gets out his music, sits down at the organ, and begins to play. Do you know how to play Bach's Prelude and Fugue in B minor? John does. Clever John. Mrs. Casey says, "That was wonderful, John. I've just noticed there are some vase holders on both sides of the organ where I could put some flowers. I'll go and ask the new pastor if that would be all right." "That's a good idea," says John.
I do wish you wouldn't.
But it's so close to life. I haven't met the new pastor yet either. While Mrs. Casey is away, John looks in one of the cupboards where some of the music is kept. John sees the vases or vases that fit the organ and takes them to show Mrs. Casey. Kind John. Mrs. Casey's in the vestry with the new pastor. Mr. Kidneys.
I see the red flag.
See John knock at the door. Mr. Kidneys opens the door, introduces himself to John. "Mrs. Casey will be with you shortly," he says. "She's just under the sink looking for some more vases. Was that you playing the organ earlier? I recognise the Bach. What was the second piece?" John says, "That with the Prayer and Hallelujah from 3 pieces by Calvin Hampton." "I like that a lot," said Mr. Kidneys. So did Mrs. Casey. "Please play some more." Soon Mrs. Casey comes back and sees the vases. "Thank you, John," she says. "I'll have to see what autumn flowers I can put in them. Of course, it's much better than in the spring. I have lovely red and yellow tulips in my garden, and it would make a beautiful display. My husband is always away in springtime, so I've lots of time to pick the best flowers." When John gets home, Janet is knitting. Janet likes knitting. Janet says, "Did you have a nice time, John?" "Yes, I did," said John. "I played for quite a long time in the organ. Then I was helping Mrs. Casey, who was in the vestry. When I knocked on the vestry door, Mrs. Casey was on her knees, and the man said he was Pastor Kidneys. He, Mrs. Casey, would be happy to deal with me next. She was very impressed with the Hampton. Even the pastor said it was a fine piece. Mrs. Casey said that she can't wait for the spring when her husband is away and she can get her tulips round that organ." See Janet get out her Denise interchangeable needles. Can you make someone look like a hedgehog? Janet. Disgraceful.